Welcome back, everybody, to the 1987 Supermod. I'm Brad Drake, and today is going to be Introduction Video Part 9. This is going to be a sneak peek for what is coming in version 7.0, which is going to be released in the first week of March. Originally, I was going to release 7.0 in the first week of February, but I got some new ideas and wanted to add a lot more information. So I went ahead and pushed it off to the first week of March. Let's go over real quick what's already been added and then what will be added later on down the road. First of all, we added Nick Gulas. For those of you that don't know, Nick Gulas was an original promoter down in the Memphis area and that territory for years before he took on Jerry Jarrett as a partner, and then they split and Jerry Jarrett took over, and shortly after that, Nick Gulas' side of the business folded, went out of business. So we put him in the game. He deserves to be in the game. He had a lot of influence on pro wrestling. He was born in 1914, and he started with wrestling in 1937. So he is 73 years old already at this point in the game, and it's just a good idea to have him in, and he deserves to be in the game. So I went ahead and put him in there. I also added his relationships. He's got a bad relationship with Jerry Jarrett. And also he had a son by the name of George Gulas who wrestled, who was absolutely awful, that he pushed to the moon. About the only thing remarkable about George Gulas was that he had a tag team partner who was known as Bobby Eaton, and they went ahead and made up the Jet Set. So outside of Nick Gulas, and I could be mispronouncing his name, but I'm pretty sure it's Gulas. I got a Greek girlfriend, and I think that's how they pronounce it. Stanpulaski. Stanpulaski wrestled also as one of the Vashans. He wrestled as Stan Vashan. So we went ahead and added him to the game. And he held a lot of titles in the AWA. And then as I've gone down and started working on stuff in Georgia and that area, he has also added, he's also had a lot of titles down there too. So he's retired at this point in the game. But as always, if you talk to him, you might be able to bring him back. So he's also a road agent. You can pick him up and use him as a road agent. He was a very successful wrestler, and he's a good hand to have, and I wanted to make sure he got put into the game. Next, we can go over Luke Brown. Luke Brown was one half of the Kentuckians with Jake the Snake Roberts' father, Grizzly Smith. So they were a successful tag team. They won. I went Luke Graham. I meant to put Luke Brown. Sorry. They won tag titles all over the place. The Midwest, Georgia, all over. So I thought, again, it was important to put him into the game. He was a pretty influential guy. He's long retired at this point. He never really came back to wrestling, but again, you never know. You might be able to get him. And another fun one I added that I thought was appropriate was Reggie Parks. For those of you that may not know, after he retired from from wrestling, Reggie Parks became one of the greatest belt makers of all time. And he produced a lot of the very well-known title belts that we all grew up with in the 80s and 90s for the WWF. He was really a very, very talented guy in making belts. But before that, he had a career as a terrific wrestler. And the guy had a great body. He was always in great shape. Reggie Parks was originally from Canada. He was good friends with Stu Hart and the Hart family. And he was still working in 1987. He was still wrestling. He did some enhancement work for the WWF in 1987. The guy was still in great shape, and he was in his 50s at the point. So his picture here is actually the one I screen captured from one of his matches in 1987. So it's another fun guy to have there. He won a lot of titles in the Midwest and also in the NWA circuit in the South and stuff like that. He had titles all over the place. Now, you may or may not know, but the CWA, Jerry Jarrett's CWA, actually had a CWA World Heavyweight title for a little while. So I added the CWA World Heavyweight title and its history to the game. It did not last long. We can look it up real quick here, but we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on it because it wasn't a very important belt, but it is cool to have it in the game. There's also a CWA, the Catch Wrestling Association in Germany, so you don't want to get those two confused. So I put this down with a Memphis, parentheses Memphis behind it. And that was the actual title. And it was around from 79 to 81. So all of the title changes and everything, the whole lineage is here in the game. It's all right there. So this title will show up. And the important part to me to put these old titles in there is the fact that when you look at certain wrestlers, it's going to have these belts listed in their titles. So I think it's an important part of wrestling history and to try to get as much of that stuff in the game as possible. So the same as the CWA World Tag Team title. Now, for those of you that are not familiar or you're young fans, Georgia Championship Wrestling was a huge NWA territory, okay? It was one of the first ones to be on national television. It had the slot, the 605 slot, on TBS in the early 80s. It was a long-standing promotion, all the way, I think, from 1968 until 1985. It was a great promotion. A lot of the big-time wrestlers went through there, and I went through the painstaking process of putting the Georgia heavyweight title and all of its dozens and dozens of changes into the game. So although Georgia Championship Wrestling no longer exists at this point, its titles are now in the game, and the lineage is going to be tied to all the wrestlers that held their titles. Okay? The other interesting thing about Georgia Championship Wrestling that people don't realize is the Briscoe brothers ended up becoming partners with Ole Anderson, who owned the promotion. And Vince McMahon actually bought out Georgia Championship Wrestling by buying the Briscoe brothers' shares. So the Briscoe brothers actually ended up working for the WWF after that. Vince McMahon took over the time slot, the 605 time slot, with WWF television. Apparently, people were so pissed off that they weren't getting their, as they called it, Gordon Soley Wrestling, that Turner actually created another time slot specifically for Ole Anderson, who relaunched under Championship Wrestling from Georgia. Okay, then, as history lets us know, the 605 time slot was bought out by Jim Crockett. Vince McMahon told, correction, somewhere along the line, somebody said, I hope you choke on it as far as the money. And allegedly, that $1 million is what helped finance the first WrestleMania. So let's take a look at the Georgia Tag Team title. Folks, I spent hours and hours and hours putting these title histories in there. It is a painstaking long process. And I think the tag title alone has well over 100 changes. So that's every single one. Then you have to click and draw and drag down and get the right wrestler. It is a painstaking process. So the NWA Georgia Tag Team title, was also added into version 7.0. Now remember, I can't import these titles into my current save. So we're not going to see them until we play 7.0. We also added KC Thunder, who was an independent wrestler. We added the notorious Ron Wright, who was a wrestler in the South for many years, who at this point is managing. He also went on to have a end of his career run with Jim Cornette's promotion, independent promotion. He also spent a lot of time in Continental. Ron Fuller speaks very highly of Ron Wright, so I was happy to put him into the game. So the UWF is going strong in this save. Well, strong is a interesting word, but the UWF was first MidSouth Wrestling, and it then became UWF. Bill Watts attempted to take them national. Okay, so one thing I noticed when playing this game is that the North American title and the old Mid-South tag title, they weren't recognized in the game. Now, the tag title was part of the Mid-South tag title, the UWF tag title in the game, but that's not right. They were two separate titles. Also, there was a Louisiana heavyweight title for a while in Mid-South Wrestling. So I went ahead and I put these titles painstakingly into the game. So there they are. There's the North American heavyweight title. Now, of course, these titles are retired, but the people that won these titles will now be recognized in the game. They're in the lineage, and it's all historically accurate. So I did the same with the Louisiana heavyweight, which again was painstaking to do, but I did it. Okay, also was the Mid-South Wrestling Tag Team title. And I went ahead and got that whole lineage into the game. So when you click on wrestlers now, they are going to have these titles represented. It's again historical accuracy and historical data. Okay. So those titles were all added in. Tom Renesto is an interesting guy. Tom Renesto I added into the game. Tom Renesto was best known as Assassin Number 2. Tom Renesto made a short comeback in 1987 to wrestling. He was featured on Memphis television, so we put him in the game. And all his tag titles are going to be in the game, and we also got him listed as a road agent. He did some behind-the-scenes work for Memphis, so if you want, you can bring him into the game. Use him as a road agent if you want. He's not climbing back in the ring, but you could bring him on as a road agent. Next one I think is Danny Hodge. No, Pat Barrett. Pat Barrett was an Irish wrestler that had a very long career in the United States. Pat Barrett at this point was wrestling in the UWF, so I made sure to put him on the roster. You can use him. Pat Barrett's sort of at the end of his career here. He wrestles quite a few more years, but for smaller promotions he continued wrestling for. Pat Barrett once held the WWF tag team title. He's had a lot of success with a lot of different tag teams, and I'm glad we added him to the game. I thought he was an important part, and again, it was to make the UWF roster more historically accurate. The cool thing about Gennadi's original 1987 database was the fact that he had a lot of these people's picture in there already. He had just never actually added them into the game. So Hiro Matsuda is another one. I thought at this time that Hiro Matsuda was retired and done with the ring already. I was wrong. Hiro Matsuda was still working matches. So we made the adjustments here, and you can still hire Hiro Matsuda if you want, and you can have him on your cards. For those of you that don't know, Hiro Matsuda is one of the greatest trainers of all time out of Florida. He had a long-standing partnership with Eddie Graham in Championship Wrestling from Florida, and I think he actually had some money in the business too and was a business partner. Hiro Matsuda is the one that famously broke Hulk Hogan's ankles, and Hulk Hogan came back and trained. We also added the notorious NWA Western States Heritage title, so that's going to be listed under the NWA as a retired title, and you can activate it in June of 1987 if you want to and use it. So it's there. Obviously, it's got a clean title history at this point because nobody's actually held it. What else did we add? We added Steve Party, who was on the UWF roster. We added Ron Ellis. Ron Ellis was also enhancement talent on the UWF roster. And this is one I've wanted to do for a long time, and I finally did. Danny Hodge is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. Jim Ross just spoke so highly of Danny Hodge, and rightfully so. Danny Hodge was an Olympic wrestler. He was one of the strongest people of all time. He actually had a condition where he had extra tendons in his hands that actually made him way physically stronger than the average person. He could crush apples and fruits and stuff like that with his hands. He was freakishly strong, and he was a really good wrestler. Danny Hodge helped put the NWA World Junior Heavyweight title on the map. So I thought it was important to add him to the game. Danny Hodge also, he worked his last match in, I think it was 1982 after a real bad car wreck, but you may or may not be able to get him to wrestle in this game. He also did some color commentary work with MidSouth Wrestling and some other promotions, so you could get him to be your color commentator if you wanted. And let's actually make sure that that's reflected properly, and it's not. And we're going to correct that right now while we're doing this. We're going to give him a 60 as a color commentator. I messed up when I originally created him, but I just caught it now. So we're good to go for Danny Hodge. So I thought it was really important to put Danny Hodge in the game, and now he's in there. Next, we added the NWA National Heavyweight title, which Georgia Championship Wrestling ended up using, along with the National Tag Team title. Okay. Before they closed down, they went with these two titles. If you remember watching Jim Crockett Promotions in the mid '80s, you would see these titles represented on the show. Those are originally Georgia Championship Wrestling titles that Crockett ended up using. This was again a very painstaking process putting these titles into the game, but they are there now. So there you go. The National Heavyweight title is in the game. Again, it was retired in Crockett Promotions in '86. The full lineage is in the game. And also the National Tag Team title is in the game now with a full lineage. Okay, so this is, like I said, folks, this is hours and hours and hours of work. But every day we get more, we keep stepping closer to more and more realism. So, just a heads up for you, what else is going to be coming in 7.0? I'm going to add the Mid-Atlantic titles. They're going to be retired titles under Jim Crockett Promotions, but they and all their history is going to be in there. Also, the Missouri Heavyweight title, which was a very prestigious title out of the St. Louis Wrestling Club that was considered the precursor to the NWA World Heavyweight title. They pretty much said if you won the NWA Missouri title, that your next stop was going to be the World Heavyweight Champion. So I think it's important, very important, to add that title to the game. These other titles, I'll think again about doing them. These were smaller titles in the Georgia territory and some other territories, but I'm going to look into adding them into the game also. We'll see. We're going to add some more wrestlers. We're looking at adding Klondike Bill, Sputnik Monroe, Rip Hawk, and probably some others. So really, folks, this is just an update for you to tell you what is coming, what's going to be available to you in the version 7.0. And let's go ahead and let's import our new wrestlers. They have not been imported, and we're going to do it here on the game. So again, this is my current active AWA save. Like I said before, sadly, we can't bring people's title histories or titles into the game, but we can bring the people. So we're going to go ahead and bring Nick Gulas, Stanpulaski. He's in. Stanpulaski is now in, also known as Stan Vachon. And we just talked about Danny Hodge. Brought him into the game, no problem. Luke Brown, Reggie Parks. There's Reggie Parks. And who else did we discuss? Casey Thunder, Ron Wright. And Tom Renesto, Pat Barrett. Unfortunately, Pat Barrett's not going to come with his contract, but he will be available to pick up. Tom Renesto's in there. Pat Barrett is now in the game. We're going to add Party. We're going to add Ellis. There's Ron Ellis. And Hiro Matsuda, if we wanted to make him an active competitor, we would have to go into the game, my save, and make that edit. So all of these wrestlers are now in the game. Again, I cannot import titles, so which is a shame, but that's all right. Maybe we'll do a version 7 save here soon. So that's it for today, folks. That's the work that's been put in towards 7.0, and when that comes out in March, you'll be able to enjoy it. And we'll keep doing these update videos, and we'll let you know what's going on and what's going into the new save. Folks, if you haven't already, please give our YouTube channel here a like. Go ahead and subscribe. If you want a copy of this mod, go to braddrake.net/contact. Let me know. I'll be more than happy to email over a link to the Google Drive page for you, and you can download not only the database, but the picture pack also. Last but not least, if you'd like to participate with us and talk about your save and everything about this 1987 Supermod, please visit our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/1987 Supermod. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Leave comments below. Have some discussions with us if you have questions, or if there's something you want to see in the version 7.0, let me know. I'll be more than happy to add it in there. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.